everybody, and welcome back to the Papers Podcast, a podcast where we go through the medical education literature to help make sense of it so you can make sense of your day. I'm here with the usual cast of characters, Jason.
Hi, everybody.
And John.
Hey, Lara. Hi, everyone.
And today we have a paper by my friend who picked a great one, Linda.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the Papers Podcast. Just before we start on the paper, I have a couple of questions for you. For Jason and John, when we started our prior podcast many, many years ago, how was this work received and recognized by your institution or department or colleagues? There might be different things. Jason.
I have a very simple sentence for that. It was disparaged. So we had a very positivist department head at the time who was a huge researcher in the New England Journal all the time. And he didn't accept education papers, let alone new media. So it took about 15 years before it was recognized. But to the credit of my group, they now have a very elaborate way of recognizing social media. It's scored. You can get points for it. It is awesome.
When I told my chair in the P&T committee, and next, that's exactly what they said back to me. Now, I will also foreshadow that in the intervening, I guess, 13 plus years since we've been doing this, that's changed. But I won't let the cat out of the bag yet. Yeah. Is that a metaphor? Is that a thing? Is that I don't? Where did I come up with that? It doesn't make any sense.
The cat out of the bag?
We're
not going to go cat in a bag. I don't know.
It's a medieval thing. It had to do with I won't say.
Okay, so I must say my experience was the same. The only thing is, I will say, I think there's a bit of a generational difference. My learners, residents would always say, "Oh, cool, you're doing a podcast. Where is it? I want to listen." My peers would say, "Podcast? What's a podcast?" Anyway, Lara, you wanted to say something.
When I started joining the podcast, I actually was discouraged from doing it, because it was deemed to be ruining my reputation by some people in my local institution.
Wow.
Right?
They were right. You're hanging out with us.
So, we have varying followers on Twitter/X. I'm around 1,500. Jason's around 150 million or something like that. But he's about 10 times mine anyway. We certainly have had very generous hits on our previous podcasts, which now I think some of my colleagues and the performance review people are a little bit more impressed with. So today we're going to look at a paper which I have entitled, "Will Being Active on Social Media Get You a Professorship?" It's by Fitzgerald and colleagues from the University of Pittsburgh. It's called "A Worksheet to Quantify Social and Digital Media Content and Scholarly Products for Academic Promotion, Academic Medicine." It is published ahead of print as of early 2024. Now, I didn't pick this paper because it's got fantastic methodology or a research paradigm or anything like that. I'm sorry, Lara, I didn't. I actually picked it because there's times when people make policies and procedures out of nothing. And at least this group tried to make a policy that was somewhat evidence-based. So kudos for them for doing that. And academic medicine does, on occasion, tend to publish papers that sort of tend to the policy side of things. So we know, and we've certainly talked about it on our last podcast, that social and digital media contributions are things that many academics do. There's many advantages to social media used for work. We're talking about now efficiency of dissemination of scientific information. It's a complementary role to published work, even though they actually spelled it wrong in the paper. They said complementary, but that's okay.
You found the typo.
I found it. I found the typos in most of them. Increasing impact or readership or citations. We talked about that last podcast too. a timely way of adding to academic discourse. You're not waiting for something to be published weeks or months later. It is a record, a footprint online of our contributions to the public, and it may lead to opportunities for scholastic leadership. So it seems to me, as it seemed to these authors, that using social and digital media to share expertise, those using it should be able to report impact and outcomes that could be used as part of a promotions package. And for those of you who aren't necessarily in an institution where it is a very rigorous process to get promotions, what get promoted rather, what often happens is you have to gather evidence of what you've done and what the impact of what you've done has been at various levels, local, regional, national, international. So these authors set about to create a worksheet for including social and digital media contributions in an institutional promotion package. And they also included not just what should be included, but a rubric sort of thing for evaluating the contributions. So is this worthwhile? Is this an exercise that people should be going through? John, Lara, Jason?
I don't think we need to go through the exercise. I think there is some value in using what has been reported here. I think that's the purpose of an innovation report. Don't reduplicate what the groundwork has been done, probably modify for context.
So I also think that it's a valuable tool, but I also have to say that with reflecting back on our previous recent recording about how Twitter ain't what it used to be no mo. And it's not really knowledge translation skill. So then all of a sudden the question is, your social media presence, your digital platform presence, now we're starting to, I'm just wondering how long this is going to be relevant in this space. I don't know.
I think that's a worthy thread to bring up, and we'll see how they tackle it. I don't think we should confuse the Twitter paper about did it meet some KT criteria, and confuse that with impact, because there is lots of evidence, as John mentioned in that podcast, of impact. It enhances citations and so on. Yeah,
and I guess the question is how do we define impact, which is part of what they're talking about in this manuscript. That's what this paper is about.
Precisely. So just before Linda moves us along, I have a little thought experiment for you. So what if, this is about new media. So if you rewind in history back to new media where it changed over to the printing press and people were releasing these little pamphlets, would people not get promoted? Because it's like, that new media pamphlet stuff, it's not as good as what we used to do.
Yeah, what Aristotle wouldn't get promoted today because, he didn't publish anything. So
No, but he was a pretty good mentor.
Yeah, but nobody knows if it was his stuff or Plato, because Plato, anyway,
that's true.
It's a whole bunch of stuff.
Okay, let's move on to methods here. So basically, a group of 6 academics, very diverse, varied specialties, varied training, varied academic ranks, some in leadership roles that were relevant here, like head of a promotions committee, dean of faculty affairs, etc., got together in a committee and said, we're going to try and make this worksheet. They started out by reviewing the literature on scholarship. What is scholarship? And they, of course, included Glassick in that. They reviewed the literature on how to quantify social media impact. They looked at examples of guidelines. I'm not sure whether they looked at yours from your division, Jason, but it sounds like it's fantastic. And they looked at promotions practice. So they got a pretty decent background. And they introduced me to the concept of PESP, P-E-S-P. It's an acronym for Publication Equivalent Scholarly Product. In other words, something that's kind of like a paper that probably took as much work, but isn't a paper that's being published in a peer-reviewed journal. They talked about practice guidelines, web-based curriculums, etc. And they thought that these efforts should reflect the effort and impact of an index publication, and that should be counted towards the publication requirements for promotions. And they applied Glassick's criteria for social media to be considered a PESP. They then used a modified Delphi method where they developed and piloted and iterated and reiterated a worksheet for faculty members to demonstrate their social media contributions, and then for promotions committees to evaluate the quality of these contributions. And they have a supplement which actually shows both of these. So I'll stop before we get on to the next bit. What do you think about these methods, considering the context of this paper? I'll go Lara, John, Jason.
Considering it's an innovation paper, I don't think that I have too many comments to make about methods. Part of the reason for that is because I very rarely write innovation papers, so I feel really out of my depth when it comes to some of this stuff. But I also have to tell you, Linda, my friend, my dear, while I adore you, I'm a little mad at you because at this point in this paper, I found myself going, I have absolutely no idea what's going on if I don't open up this tool. So then I opened up the tool and I started following all this stuff. And then I found myself finding my healthcare social graph score for Dr. Lara Varpio. I got it all set. I downloaded this thing.
What's your number?
Well, my number changes depending on what time because the later it was, my number was 87. But now my number has gone down to 78 because
beating you.
I'm not on it anymore. I'm not on it anymore though, because all I got is cat videos. So so Linda, while I adore you, I found this became a rabbit hole, sinkhole of time for me because I was doing all the things to figure out, because I was also trying to figure out whether or not the podcast would count for these PE things. Yeah.
Yeah. I must admit, I did mine too with difficulty, and I decided the podcast would count, by the way. Who else was going to comment? John.
So you started by a very quick throwaway line about lack of conceptual framework, and that's a knock against it. And I want to say, put a stake in the ground, which is not every paper needs a conceptual framework. And an innovation report, I don't think needs one. They're just reporting on innovation. Go for it.
I'm just going to step in here. It needs a conceptual framework, not a theoretical framework, but moving on.
All right. So the conceptual framework is the argument for why to do it, and here's how we're going to develop our argument. Fine. Doesn't need a theoretical framework. I don't have anything to say about the methods. What they tried to do essentially is put some guardrail around here's what we're going to say counts, and here's how we're going to make it quasi-equivalent, and you can quibble with whether they did it right or not. I do want to just flag that this is kind of hilarious, their methodology. They had 6 people.
Yes.
And they did a group consensus method, which is called a Delphi. And the optimal number for a Delphi is usually around 25. And it took them 14 months to conclude their Delphi method of 6 people, which tells me that there was a lot of disagreement, or nobody cared. It was one of the two. Because there's no reason not to put 6 people in a room and say, everybody sit here for 90 minutes until we're done. Sort it out. But instead, I just imagine, I'm sure that's not the case, but wouldn't it be fun if we just put together this whole narrative about the infighting and the passive aggressiveness and juror number 5, that wouldn't agree. And I don't know any of that's true, but it's much more interesting.
It's more fun to think about it that way. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have 2 nice things to say, and I have the same concern. My nice thing is I love this publication equivalent scholarly product, PESP. Has that been around a long time? Did I miss that? Did these guys invent that? I don't know, but
invented it.
Really? I love that. I mean, there's other people who have different metrics, but I like that. I'm going to bring that to like every forum.
No. Careful now, because now we're saying the publication is the standard. And if we really believe in the scholarship of teaching and learning, then we got to push against that.
If you have a crazy positivist faculty,
then that's a whole other issue.
And this nudges them down the road,
True
I think,
fact.
a few steps. That's what I'm thinking. Okay.
Respect.
So, thank you for clarifying. I also want to say, I really appreciate that somebody in a tiny little group, like John said, tried to demonstrate rigor in this innovation report, because now all the people I work with and I'm, trying to help get something published, I can help them reframe their innovation report with this as a model paper. So I thought that has some value. My concern is just if I'm not saying that these authors did that, but in this tiny little group, and then they said they used this elaborate technique, which doesn't seem like a match. That speaks to me about this phenomenon that I think editors are pushing, where you have to demonstrate rigor by finding this methodology that has a reference out there that is justifiable. Like there's something about justification creep in methodology that I just coined that hashtag justification creep that I think is a risk to our literature. not everything has to be an established method. You could explain your rigor in other ways.
Absolutely. The final worksheet is what I would call the results. It had 4 sections: scholarship philosophy, and that was actually kind of interesting. What are you thinking about when you're actually using social media? Reputation, influence, and leadership, linking to your organization. When you having an influence with your social media, the actual content, and then other miscellaneous things like media appearance. The faculty member had to demonstrate, and I quote here, a well-considered social and digital media presence in alignment with university guidelines and values and their own career development plan. Kind of interesting. That's kind of like writing your teaching statement at the beginning of your teaching dossier. The authors, by consensus, developed criteria for the weight of some of these things like reputation and influence, and they used the healthcare social graph score, as well as various other criteria for a minima or maxima for individual pieces, like the number of views or the length of clips and such like. And these criteria informed the scoring of the worksheet. And then they describe how the worksheet could or probably should be adapted to changing contexts of other institutions. So I see, Lara, you tried the worksheet. I tried the worksheet. Gentlemen, did you by any chance?
Yeah. I found it elaborate. It took a lot of work.
Yeah.
And then I started running John's his social media graph score. And
It's called a Kardashian score, please.
yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so what they came up with, I think, is a nice little bit of a scholarly approach to developing a policy that can be used, that actually makes sense to people. It is a lot of work, but frankly, developing your portfolio for going forward for promotion is a lot of work. So I would just count it in there. I would say that I think most people would need some training to be able to complete this properly well, and also to evaluate the contributions well. So
it was
other
work.
Comments?
Yeah, I agree with that, that you couldn't just, it's not like just reading it and having an opinion. It was really a worksheet.
Yeah.
I think you can quibble about the metrics, whether 10 videos more than 2 minutes long equals a paper. I don't care. What I do think is interesting, though, is they chose populism as a measure of value rather than quality. And so if you have 5,000 followers, then that makes what you do meaningful. Now, I'll tell you that I don't think I have 5 citations or even 5 readers of most of the papers I ever write. So maybe this is my unconscious bias. But, I'll turn people to the work of Chan and Toma, who have developed a number of social media quality indicators to say, here's what best practices look like. It's not just how often you say something, it's how you say something and what's the evidence supporting it.
And I'm a little bit concerned in that as John was saying, the frequency of count doesn't equate to quality of content. And then the other part for me was that, and they mentioned this in the paper, so I give the authors credit for it, but boy, I hope nobody ever looks at the HPE numbers against the Cancer Center research scholar numbers, for instance, because it's just the size of the field is epically different. So to have, and the authors mentioned that, but I think that's a huge caveat that has to shape how anybody uses the tool.
Can I just ask, if we're poo-pooing their
I'm not
populism metric, I'm just saying, okay, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Then what's our take on all the citation counts that the entire rest of the system is using?
But that's the whole thing. Like, the part of the problem with promotion and tenure committees is what does impact mean? And I think that's the thing that makes this really hard this day and age, because, citation, well, we all know about self-citation, people retweeting you. Is that the same? Like, what does impact mean? And quite frankly, I don't think there's a good answer.
One fabulous paper in Nature versus, 50 blah papers in some obscure journal. That's, so who knows? Having said that, let's move on to what we think of the methodology in our highly validated scale. Stop cringing, Lara. And we'll let you go first then, Lara, John, Jason.
No, make the boys go first.
Okay, boys. Jason, John, Lara.
It's an innovation report. How critical can you be? They had made some good attempts at rigor. There's some really possibly silly things. So a 3.
I'll give this a 3. It's fine with this extra point via the Varpio point for adding the potential of scandal and hilarity in how they ran their.
I'm going to give it a 3 too, but largely because I think this looks like most innovation reports. So I think if we hold it up against the broad scope of literature, this is kind of what I would expect. So yeah, method-wise a 3, sure.
So I was going to give it a 3, but I think I'm going to go a little bit higher because this is an innovation paper. So an innovation paper, most people don't have any kind of evidence in it. And at least these ladies and gentlemen tried. So I'm going to give it a 4, sort of for effort. How about its impact, education impact? We'll go backwards. Lara, Jason, John.
So in terms of education impact, I'm also going to give it a 3 because I think it has the potential to be really well used. I think it also has the potential to be one of those tools that a promotion and tenure committee would use without thinking about differences in fields. And so it could equally, it's a sword that could cut both ways. It could be really helpful, but could also be a real problem. So I'm going to put it in the middle there. Put it at 3.
I like it as a 3. So with my current version of social media promotion and tenure value, we add in our podcasts and in our blogs and all that kind of thing. There is an internal metric that gives it weight, but it's weighted against the other traditional metrics of publication and grants. And it's a logarithmic differential between those two things. But it says that every video online is equivalent. And so I think they're doing tongue in cheek and saying, we don't care. We're going to value it, but not value it that much. And maybe this says, there's maybe a different way to kind of compare online resource to online resource. So they're not just apples and apples, but they're apples and oranges.
So I'm feeling 3 as well. And the rationale would be that I like that these guys had some principles that maybe would stimulate a conversation at another committee. I don't agree with their weightings. And as Lara said, what is impact? And maybe that would be a more valuable conversation to have. But given the world we live in, this can be a helpful tool for a lot of people. I would also like to mention that I submitted our podcast for a credit with my group this year, and they didn't accept it because it was below their extremely high threshold for podcast credit, which was set by somebody with a really high podcast.
OMG.
Yeah, just say.
Sorry, Jason.
All that's to say, listeners, we need to have more listeners on this podcast here. I too gave it a 3. It will be helpful, particularly for individuals who are starting off in this area. And I did like the concept of a PESP, although I think we actually have something similar on our promotions group. So there you have it. We're not yet, from the sounds of it, able to use solely social media and digital media as a means to academic promotion. You ain't going to become a full professor. You're not going to be Professor Podcast. So there we have it. Remember, you can see us on paperspodcast.com. You can reach us on thepaperspodcast@gmail. And Jason is cheering because we finally got it right. So thank you, my friends.
Talk to you later.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
And if you want to see us live and see our live banter and as Lara chops me in the ribs, you can catch us this year at ASME. We're going to be in Warwick. It's in July. Lara Varpio is the headliner. And the opening act is John. He'll be doing some juggling. But then Lara will come up with content. And we're actually going to do...
I'm more supporting band. I'm more the supporting band.
The drummer behind the screen.
I'm a Ringo to her John.
Oh.
Ringo's the coolest. So anyway, we'll be there. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and we'll be recording.
Oh, Paul.
It's a totally different topic. I'm doing a rant here.
Yeah, as you were.
Ads.
Sorry.
So come and see us. We're going to do a live Papers podcast recording. We're going to do 2 papers. We're going to have fun. There will be John jokes. There will be Lara laughing. And if I really get her worked up, we might be able to get her to get all choking and laughing and stuff. It'll be a fantastic. And we really want you there.
And before you go, listeners, please have a minute and take a thought about using some of your budget travel this year to come to Warwick in the UK for the ASME conference. We are so excited that all of us on the podcast are going to be there and have the opportunity to do some live recording. So come be in the audience, and you too can appreciate the visceral pain of having to sit through Jason and John's blah, blah, blah as we do these recordings. And you too can participate in me trying to control the eye roll. It'll be fun. Don't you think, guys?
Oh, that's a great mug. Hashtag control the eye roll.
I would buy swag that sit through the visceral torture or whatever it was. I'd buy that t-shirt.
Awesome.
So would all my children, actually. I think I could. I'll take a baker's dozen, please.
So friends, meet us in Warwick. We'll see you there this July.
You've been listening to the Papers Podcast. We hope we made you just slightly smarter. The podcast is a production of the Unit for Teaching and Learning at the Karolinska Institutet. The executive producer today was my friend Teresa Sörö. The technical producer today was Samuel Lundberg. You can learn more about the Papers Podcast and contact us at www.thepaperspodcast.com. Thank you for listening, everybody, and thank you for all you do. Take care.
Let's go, because I have to pee like nobody's business. I've had a kombucha, 2 coffees, a glass of water.
Take your time.
20 minutes is like a long time for me.
Take your time, everybody.
Don't do it now while I'm emailing, but don't take his hours to pee.
Okay, 1 second.
It's going to be 4 days.
John's gone to pee, everybody.
I'm so annoyed I put makeup on. Oh my God. I took time out of my day for that shit. I don't put makeup on for anything anymore, except for fear that this would be for video. And then what's going to happen is you're not going to tell me when it is for video.
That's exactly right.
And I'll show up in my pajamas and my ponytail on the top.
Not only that, I'm going to say it's Hillbilly Hat
Day.
You're going to show up.
I'll show up with my hillbilly hat.
And I'll have my makeup on. So there you go.
And your pajamas. That'll be quite interesting.
That'll be good.
And I'm back.